I'm the editor at University of New Orleans Press, and I guess for this book, Seeing Black, I served as the text editor. Obviously, this book is primarily images. And here today we have two of the three editors of the book, Kalamu, Salaam, and Eric Waters. And we're going to discuss what it took to put together this 5 and some change pound volume of photography that comprises about 200 contemporary and historical Black photographers, as well as some text contributions. And it's just, I mean, this has been at least 2 years in the making, maybe more. I mean, much more over time, but yeah, 2.5 years for the book itself. So it's been quite a process, and for my own part, definitely the most multifaceted project that I have worked on in my time in publishing period. So I guess first, for those who are not familiar with the project, I wanted to ask Kalamu and Eric to give an overview of what it is and what it means and what it's become. We can just start there.
I woke up one morning and realized that thinking about things, particularly this project, I was out of my depth. So I called Eric Waters, my esteemed colleague, and Eric and I went to high school together at St. Augustine High School. Eric is a professional photographer, and I'm a sometimes photographer. I have a camera, but that's another story. And I told him about an idea I had. And I don't know if, again, I can't see everybody, not that many people see me, but I don't know if you all know, but New Orleans was the second place in the continental United States to do photography. The first place, they had an exhibition up in New York City about 3 or 4 months prior to New Orleans. The distinction I made, however, is that exhibition they had in New York was not by local New Yorkers. I mean, those were people from all over the region at that time. Whereas down here in New Orleans, there was a man who was going back and forth between New Orleans and France at the time. And he was domiciled in New Orleans and thought of it, putting together this project. He was an ethnographer. He was an ethnographer. I'm glad that Chelsey's here to make it sound intelligent. Ethnographer by trade. And he had become interested in the newly developed art form of photography at the time. And he decided to do something here. And that was the beginning of photography in New Orleans.
Excuse me before you continue. He was a lithographer.
Lithographer.
Photographer.
See, they can see those words out here.
Let's get right on this.
And so part of what happened was New Orleans never really, New Orleans was never really on the map for photography. So New Orleans became known for food. New Orleans became known for street culture, not just the music, but the whole street culture. And And to a lesser degree, New Orleans at that time was known for architecture, but it was not known for photography. Even though this was the second place in the United States where photography was developed. And one of the things that Kalamu Salaam taught, that's my name, by the way, was that New Orleans ought to be known for photography in the United States. Because here, right here in this city, not only was it in terms of the timeline, was it the second place in the United States, the first place in the United States where you had indigenous photographers, that people who actually lived here were doing it. But also, we had, and this goes back to 1839, 1840. In New Orleans, believe it or not, we had black people and white people doing it. In fact, the history of New Orleans is that the quote-unquote whites arrived here later. They were the last group to arrive. Before that, you had people came from Europe. And in your history books, they refer to them as Europeans. You never see the term whites applied to them. But it's true. Both, they were Europeans and they were white. And so that this history, and if I'm boring everybody, I'm going to be through in about a second. But it's important to recognize that this is the crucible of culture in the United States that is not of European origin. I gotta repeat that. New Orleans is the crucible because New Orleans at the same time that what was happening in Europe was happening, New Orleans was also the spot for the cultures and the peoples of the Gulf Coast basin. You know, which had to do with Brazil and other places, but also with the Caribbean, South Caribbean. And that's how this came together. So when you see our book, Seeing Black, Photography in New Orleans, 1840 and beyond, when you see this book and you just open it up and you start looking at the pictures, it doesn't look like the United States. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's New Orleans. I'm through.
Let me first start off by saying New Orleans is one of two African representative cultures in the contiguous United States. The other one being the Gullah culture off the coast of Georgia, Florida, South Carolina. This book is a statement book. It's a book celebrating over 84 black photographers, all tied to New Orleans in some respect. Born and raised, came to live here, worked here, contributed here. And Kalamu is downplaying his role. He came with the idea of this book. He called me up one night and said, Eric, I'm thinking about doing a book. I want you to be a part of it. Of course, I've been on it since 1961, and he wants to be a part of it. So when he came up with this idea, there's so many aspects to this book that is unique. Unique because it celebrates 84 and counting black photographers, all tied to New Orleans, tied to a place, second place where photographers were brought to in 1840. And doing research, we found out that the earliest black studio photographer was 1870. So this book chronicles historic photographers as well as contemporary photographers. And it's unique in so many elements. The logo is unique. The book, the conception of the book is unique. The layout of the book is unique. And as you look through the book, you will see the uniqueness of it. But also the images are a reflection of how unique and how, I don't know if I statement by saying New Orleans is an African retentive city, because there are images in this book that you can't see in New York City. The second most important thing about this book is that we have given notice and presence to 84 plus black photographers who probably have never shown their work outside of family and friends, have never been published before. And that's what I'm very, very proud of this book, for being a book that gives presence to these photographers. There was a time when Roland Freeman, famous photographer, they were doing a book on black photographers and black photography. And they asked him to come down to New Orleans to photograph New Orleans, which I thought was an insult. Because no photographer has ever been asked to go to New York to photograph New York. So these images will show you a unique aspect of New Orleans that exists no other place in the contiguous United States.
Thank you. I have a lot of thoughts. I think first, I just want to look at the title, Seeing Black. It's kind of beautifully audacious. And I think I mean, it automatically is asking for something that's multidimensional, for something that's not monolithic, for something that is encompassing. And I very much feel that the images selected uphold that. So to detour a little bit, like I said, I was mostly involved in the text pieces, and I do want to say the co-editor who's not here today is Shannon Griffin, and then there were also two other text contributors. So that's the part of the project that I am more familiar with. What I'm curious about is the photo selection process, which I do not know much about, and to the point of showing not just one iteration of blackness, but many. I'm wondering how y'all sat down with all of the photos and made selections and came to agreement.
When we were first faced with the opportunity to select photographers, I knew a lot of the photographers, a lot of photographers I didn't know. From being in the street shooting second lines and shooting Mexican Indians and shooting the culture of baby dolls, I run into a lot of different photographers, so I knew them, some by name, some just by sight. But the initial process was to be objective in choosing these images. So there's only one person out of the four that was involved in the selection process. Shannon Griffin was the only one that knew, could put a face in the name to the photos. The three of us, trying to be objective, didn't know who the photographer was. And we tried to choose the image based on the strength of the image. One mistake was made in asking photographers to submit 50 images and one that they were really fond of. That's a very difficult thing because in being a photographer myself, I'm subjective. I'm always looking for, not necessarily validation, but what interests a person may have in what I photograph. So that was the first mistake, but this whole book was a learning process. if we were to do it again, we would ask to see their Instagram and their Facebook so we could see a broad spectrum of their work and then choose the strength that we were looking for in the publication. So that was the process initially. And like I said, it's a learning process on so many different levels. And Kalamu does not like to take credit for things, but he and the graphic artist Lydia Ryan came up with this genius cover and logo. They've spent many a night doing the layout of this book. And the layout is unique also. But Kalamu can speak to the uniqueness of the layout. I know nothing about the layout, but I know Coco when I see it.
Well, I will say this about the layout, Eric, since you bring it up. I'm a writer by profession, been doing it a long, long time. But I wanted to do a book that was reflective of what my first passion was, which was photography. I started photography when I was in 7th grade at Rivers Frederick Junior High School. And apropos of nothing but my particular interest, there's a photo of Dr. Rivers Frederick in this book. And I had never seen him before, although I went to Rivers Frederick Junior High School. I had never seen a photo of him before. And I saw that. But the important thing beyond sentimental value is that when we put the book together, we were thinking about a book. And what most people think of a book, they think of words. But I was thinking of imagery. So here you have a book of images. And when you open it up, you will see that there's only the name of the photographer, in this case, Lord J. Medley Jr., and the image. You got to go to the back of the book to get information about who the photographers were and where the photographer was done. And so that at the back of the book, you got a lot of information. And you also have the essays at the back of the book. But the book is not about the essays. It's not about words. So here you have a book that's not about words. It's about pictures. Think about that. You know, you got to go back to your childhood when you couldn't read. But you looked at the pictures in the book. Or you looked at the pictures on the wall or whatever. And that was the concept I had in terms of seeing black. That we actually wanted the reader to see what the book was about, rather than have to read what the book is about. So that the book is intentionally designed for people who don't read. That may sound backwards coming from a writer, but I was aware of that. And part of the reason I was aware of that is because I'm black. And here in New Orleans, but in general throughout the United States, historically, black people were not allowed to read and write. But they couldn't stop us. Nobody could stop us from imagery. And it goes way back, I mean, it's deep. But just for those of us who are literate, one of the first great black literate people was Frederick Douglass. And there's a quote by Frederick Douglass in the front of this. And in terms of doing the research for Seeing Black, I found out that Frederick Douglass was the first literary critic in the United States. And he was someone who stole the art of writing. He was enslaved at the time, and he tricked young people, young whites, into teaching him or showing him what writing was about. And that's how it developed from there. So I was interested, I had an interest in Frederick Douglass. One of the schools I was teaching at was Douglass. You know, I mean, it goes on and on. But I really wanted to understand, as a writer, how would I do a book where the emphasis was on the image rather than on the words.
The other aspect to that is, I know a lot of us have gone to galleries and museums, and the first thing some people want to do before looking at the artwork or the photo is to read the narrative. And through my experience, sometimes the narrative was better than the photo or the artwork. So I told myself I need to be a writer. I've always thought about an image, and that's why the layout is so important. Is the only thing other than the photo is the photographer's name. So when you look at the image, that's your impression, that's your first impression, without having to go about, other than the name, there's no narrative explaining the image. So your first impression is unique in a certain aspect, a certain way, that you're not encouraged by the narrative when you look at the photo.
It's organic, visceral. Kalamu, I'm glad you touched on kind of the relationship between expression and power. I know in my own writing and editing, like my own text life, it feels transgressive because I know that my ancestors were disallowed the power of language, or it was seen as not belonging to them. And although it's true, like you can't take away somebody's power to behold or like create images in the same exact way as you can prevent someone from literacy. At the same time, images have been heavily weaponized against Black people, and Mr. Mouton's essay gets into that a lot in his archival explorations of Black photography. Whether in the form of racist images or in the form of fetishistic images, like all kinds of violence can be encompassed in the image. So I can't help but see this book as a balm with all of these self-made images of Blackness. And I guess on a similar note, we've had 2 launches so far of this book. One was a private one just for the photographers and editors, and then we also had the public one earlier this week at Community Book Center. And both of these events were just quite beautiful for me to behold, to see the community and the relationships and the currents of like mentorship and inspiration and support that were visualized by everybody gathering together to come and celebrate this book. And so, as much as it is celebrating the history of Black photography and visibilizing the history of Black photography in this city, and also making a testament to the present, like what currently exists, I also feel like it's making such like it's an enrichment for the future, like it's enriching the soil for the future, and I really saw that in our events. So I guess I want to ask y'all, what are your hopes for what this book will bring? Like, what do you want it to grow?
As I said earlier, the second most important thing about this book is giving presence to all these photographers. We also want to not just stop with the photographers represented in the book, but we want to find other photographers and give them a presence also. We have a website called seeingblack.org, and we're going to expand the website to include focusing on other photographers that are not in the book and giving them some presence also.
Yeah, and I would say that what I want to accomplish, what I would like to see the book do, is 50 years from now, people be referring to this book. Long after we're gone, people will refer to this book, not just as the first book of this kind of get out, but really use the book the way some of us are taught in school and what have you, and in families that it's passed on. And I cannot overstate how important community acceptance of the book is. Because that is the way that something becomes important. Not because it's in a paper, newspaper, or because it's on television, whatever. But really because people have embraced it and think that it's important. And every time we show the book around to different people, I learn something because people say, oh, that's my cousin. I mean, you know, it really knocks you out because you realize with all the imagery that we have here, I didn't think about this in terms of relatives. This was part of what we wanted to do in terms of Black expression. But people in the city, they pick up the book and they start flipping through it and say, oh, I know her. And that makes a big difference. I mean, I assume that this is a writer's, this is a conference that attracts writers. So you know how you feel when somebody says they know your work? Well, just imagine you got a book, and almost every page you open it up, somebody say, oh, I know it, I know him. I know him. That means that what you have accomplished is embraced by whatever the community is that you were striving to reach. And for those of us who are writers by profession, that doesn't happen at all. You know, I mean, I've written a lot of stuff, but it's nothing like this particular book. And the funny thing about it is, see, you look at it, you don't see no title or nothing. It's on the spine, but on the front, and on the front, it's embossed. You have to feel it. It's textual. You have to feel it. The imagery is there, but you can only see it if you get close to it. But you can feel it even if you're blind. You know, Lydia Orion of Eritrean heritage, she did a hell of a job on that. The final thing I'm gonna say, and then I'll shut up. I won't say no more. Despite what my esteemed colleagues. The University of New Orleans. Abram, you in the audience? I'm here. All right, Abram, Chelsey, and some other people. They gave us the opportunity to do this. And I'm sure it might have been somebody else or some other organization or school or whatever, or Getty or somebody. They might have given us that same opportunity. But it was the University of New Orleans that did it. It wasn't Getty. It wasn't somebody out of New York, you know, or San Francisco or whatever. It was the University of New Orleans. And what we have here in this city is people who are willing to take a chance and do something. Which, this is a big ass book. Almost 400 pages. like I said, you can't handle it with one hand. And it was printed, we thought at first it was going to be printed in Lithuania. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, in Lithuania. But then we didn't even get it printed in Lithuania. It was printed in Hong Kong. And it had to be sent here by ship. That's right. Because something like this is truly international. We realize we have to reach beyond ourselves. And when Abram told me, he said, you know, it's being printed in the East. I said, New York? No, the East.
Way further than New York.
But that's important that we realize that that's part of the history of New Orleans, that it's an international city. And it has connections all around the world, more so than it has connections to the continental, quote-unquote, United States. It's just mind-blowing. I'm through.
Let me just say these two names again. Abram, Chelsey. They were gracious enough to give us a book that we didn't even imagine. We thought we had something at the beginning. But when we saw a copy of the book for the first time, it gave us more than we had expected. More than even we thought we wanted. They both listened and they gave us this phenomenal book right here.
I mean, it was certainly our honor. Yeah, I don't know. Thinking back to the community books launch, I just felt such a sense of humility to be in the midst of like the community, like I said, and like the love and the connection, and also just the power. Like that space really felt like this crucible of power to reach into the future with more image making and more collaboration and more, solidarity, I suppose. So it's really been my honor to work on this, as much as at certain points I did feel I would go crazy from like, especially like all the names cross-referencing to make sure everything matched between table of contents, index, just like a lot of detail work, which I appreciate and enjoy, but it was a lot. So I'm also very, very proud of this book. Eric, you said earlier that making this book has been a learning process. I want to press on that a little bit. I'm curious what's something that each of you have learned through the gargantuan task of creating this book.
Dealing with adversity. A lot of times we bump heads. But one of the great things about this book, we all came together. We settled our differences and the opinions we had in terms of images, photographers, layout, all these different things. I remember me being naive about layout. I almost said, we won't number each page. The number will be on the white page. I said, hold on, man, wait a minute. Why are you not numbering? Okay. He said, Eric, you'll see it when you see the layout. So I'm looking at it, saying, what's keeping me from seeing the photographer's name on the white page, turning the page, there's no number, why don't I assume that that's not the photo of that name? He said, Eric, you gotta see it in the layout. I said, you can talk about layout all you want. Common sense tells me that it may be the picture that follows the first picture with the name. And lo and behold, when I saw the layout, it made sense. It made sense because it's unique. Just so many things about this book, as I said earlier, is it's a unique process. Everything about this book was, like I said, was a learning process. I've done another book before. But it wasn't like this book. The book I did before was all of my images, of course, but there was a narrative, and I had some of the best writers, I think, in the country writing for that book, Kalamu being one of them. But this book was another step. And I'm so proud of it. I'm proud of the people that have been part of it. I'm proud of the photographers that have let us use the images, and it's just been a great experience.
I used to ask people if y'all have any questions, observations, whatever. Yes, sir.
I want to observe that I've been tremendously impressed by the history departments dealing in this century, dealing with Creoles of color, not just at LSU, although LSU has kind of been a leader in this, but in other universities as well. All that being said, credits to LSU and academia, but to have this coming from UNO is really, really great. It's really just different.
Thank you, Shannon. Okay.
We can't see over here.
And Avery, back, like, I hear his voice coming from back.
So, I'm way at the back. Yeah. But you had a question?
Oh, yeah. So as a native New Orleanian who doesn't live here, I just come back home once or twice a year. I'm very conscious of the culture and its change. Culture's always changed. But what's notable to me is a lot of the images that are in the book now is not as readily available throughout the city to see and feel and experience. So I'm wondering what you all thought about and noticed from capturing such a long time period in terms of cultural representation in New Orleans.
We just wanted it to be New Orleans. We wanted somebody who's been away from home for a long time to pick it up and feel like, oh yeah, this is home. It's the home I remember. And somebody who's been here, like many people in New Orleans, many black people in New Orleans, the first time they left was when the hurricane hit a while back. That's the first time anybody in their family had ever left New Orleans. I don't think we heard it. You know, so we wanted those folks to feel like, yeah, that reflects me, but also people like yourself who have not been here for a while, to come back and as soon as you pick it up, say, oh yeah, that's New Orleans. We wanted to have something that you could say was like a touchstone, representative.
I'll be very short. One of the things I wrote in my narrative was, we are what we say we are. This book does not have other people define us. We're very capable of defining ourselves.
Don't be afraid of us, we don't bite. You can't say whatever you got to say.
I have two questions. To piggyback off of what Eric said regarding not having captured on the left-hand side of the book, and you couldn't envision how that would look because you don't think that was behind the next page, which is right here to the first page. So I don't have the book yet. Okay, so can you explain to me, conflicts, you know, what's on that left-hand side and who it belongs to, the picture?
Well, see, that's the thing about it. It's just like when you go to the second line, you don't know who all it is. You just go because that's what we do. And there's no way for me to explain. I could make up a reason, but it's just like, we want you to feel it. Now, you don't have to think about it. Just want you to feel what it is. And I have over 20 years experience working Black Legion magazine and other publications and doing. So I know that there are ways to design, to put something together where you don't have to tell people what it is. And you can't tell people what it is because you can't tell people what you see. I can't tell you what you see when you look at this, but I can design it in such a way that it's open to your interpretation. This is not telling you you got to look at it a certain way. It's open to your interpretation. Whosoever you may be, it's open, and people feel that. And I would say this one thing. No matter who you are, black, white, red, brown, whatever. No matter if you're from, quote unquote, heaven help you from someplace else. No matter where you're from, you look at these images and you can relate to it in one way or another. And whatsoever you may feel, that's real about these images. It's like going out here and going to one of these second lines and what have you. At the second line, ain't nobody telling you what to think. They ain't even telling you how to dance, if you dance. Nobody said nothing to you about that. That's academic. You go there and have a good time and think whatever you think, and feel whatever you feel. The same way, that's the way we wanted this book to be.
In addition to that, this book is unique in another aspect. It breaks rules. To give you an example, in photography, there's a rule that when you take a photo, it's supposed to speak in 3 equal parts, as opposed to something interesting on the left and the middle and the right. Well, if you know the rule, you can break that rule. It's also a thing of having an image to the far right and have nothing but negative space to the left. If the image is strong enough, it'll speak, right? So, in terms of this book, the answer to your question is this book breaks rules, right? On purpose. You may not explain it that way, but it does. And that's what makes the book unique and interesting.
I have a little theory tidbit, and then I want to hear your second question. But this discussion is making me think of Zora Neale Hurston's conception of aesthetics, and I think she says that Black aesthetics or African aesthetics tend to focus on the gestural, like what is emergent and organic and like self-derived, these kinds of ideas, rule-breaking, etc. Whereas Eurocentric aesthetics tend to be more replicative, like you need to like do it this certain way in order to signal a certain thing. So I thought of that as y'all were discussing kind of the aesthetic theory behind these choices. And what was your second question?
Okay, when I first came in, it was stated that New Orleans was the second place of photography. What's the first?
New York.
Okay. Thank you.
What did you say,
It happened in New York, but New York, they had the first exhibition of photography was in New York a couple of months later.
It was a different type of photography. I can't explain what type of photography was brought to New York, but the daguerreotype photography was brought to New Orleans. Daguerre, the guy who invented photography in France, the daguerreotype photography in France in 1938-39, and then Jules Leon was just an understudy to him, and he brought the daguerreotype photography to New Orleans in 1840.
Right, and Jules Leon was domiciled in New Orleans at the time, and he would go back and forth between France and New Orleans. And by the way, Jules Leon, we don't know, we tried to do the Dick Tracy kind of stuff in Tracy. But going back the records are not exact who he actually was. So we don't know specifics about Jules Leon. And that's part of New Orleans also. You know, because people come here and they don't know. They see some of us talking to some of the other. In fact, a friend of mine said, he came down here for, who was the first great mayor? Dutch Morial. He came down here for Dutch Morial's inauguration. And he was confused. He said, I thought they said they had a black mayor.
That's true.
And what I'm saying is, in New Orleans is one of the few places in the United States, even though the color line was very much evident in the United States, in New Orleans you couldn't look at nobody and tell. Still to this day, you know, when you walk around the streets, you can't really tell sometimes.
One of the cases in point is Plessy versus Ferguson.
Yeah.
Plessy looked white, but he assumed being black, and he sat on the street corner, and he said, I'm black, and that's when he arrested him. So he's exactly right about that. Everything you see is not what you see, what you think you see.
Other audience questions or comments?
You can't offend us, because we heard a bunch of shit.
That's a good question.
You spoke on, and this radical, the idea that we're not going to tell you what the context is. If you'd like to find out what we think it is, you can continue to start from back with you. But would you speak, one right as well, on the other thing that's big is the cost? Books like this haven't been sold for this price in over 30 years.
Well,
Blame him.
where's Abram? Blame Abram also.
No.
I told,
No.
I told Abram what we wanted to do, and he let us do it. And I said,
Well, you blame him for letting you do what you wanted to do.
right.
Okay.
I said, if this is truly a book that reflects black culture, we got to make sure that black people can get it.
Yes.
So that if it costs $100, a whole bunch of people that we know are not going to pay, even if they have the $100 in their pocket, they're not going to pay for a book. You know, I mean, some of this stuff we really thought about. So, Abram, I'll give him credit. He didn't laugh at me when I said we wanted to make the book affordable. So it's $40. It's $40. And Abram said, well, you know, the photographers could get it cheaper. I said, okay, I'm for that. So it's $20 for the people that make up the book.
Well, let me just say this. Nobody disagreed with Kalamu. We all agreed with him. And the reasoning behind putting the price at that price point, we all agreed on. There was nobody that said, well, I don't think so. No, we agree with him. But he's at fault.
And it's important because if you want to reach a certain audience, you got to appeal to that audience. And I wasn't interested. I've done that. I'm not interested in trying to reach, quote unquote, highfalutin folk. This was a book about people on the street, and I wanted it available to the people on the street. And if y'all could have been at Community Book Center, that's what was sold.
Very moving.
Oh, okay. I have a question about like perceiving or like experiencing photos. If you flip through, you know, the photo section, there are a lot of different styles, like a lot of different aesthetics, I guess you would say. And I'm wondering, like, everybody has their own taste, right? So like, what's the relationship for the two of you, just like as individuals who look at pictures, between like the taste or the types of photos you prefer, and like appreciating their power regardless of your personal preferences? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that part of what we did, Eric and he's alluded to it in some of the discussions and arguments we had amongst ourselves about it. But the whole idea was embrace everything. Embrace everything. So there's stuff in here, there's pictures in here I do not like. But my personal taste was not put forward as the ultimate deciding factor. It had to be a collective endeavor. And when you make something collective, in the true sense of the word, you take into consideration what other people think, and not just what you think. And so when you get 4 people, well, actually it was 6 of us, actually 4. 4 of us that made certain decisions, but then when we got to the layout and so on. Yeah, see, you don't even consider that. But check the part. The decision about what images we would use was made by a group of 4 of us. But then, when we decided how to put the book together and everything else, other people came into it, and they had a right to make a decision about it.
Yeah, he changed the narrative. He changed the narrative completely. No, there were 4 of us that determined what images were going to be used. And that's what I said earlier. We reached a concession like it was 2-2. Somebody acquiesced. We didn't continue the argument. We just said, okay, no problem. I'll be the third deciding vote. And that's how we did it.
On page 191, there's one picture in here I want to call, since we've got a captain over here. This picture may not seem to be much of an aesthetic picture. But what it is, this is one of the few pictures I've seen that shows New Orleans actually in a bend in the river. You know, everybody, you said the city living is in a bend in the river. Everybody know that. But how many people have seen that? You know, this picture shows it, so you see the city in the bend in the river.
Other audience questions or comments?
You said, who was that?
I don't know, I guess I'm thinking of maps, you know, the difference between a map and a photo, and getting to see that embrace of the river in like the flesh, so to speak, is powerful. Yes.
First, congratulations on the book, and I'm curious about the title. A more traditional book might say New Orleans 1842, whatever the date. So I'm curious about the decision to name it and beyond.
Because we Negroes. We've been here, we're gonna be here.
Like I said in the beginning, this is a statement book. It could not have been anything less. It's us defining ourselves for ourselves and for others. That we can't be defined by other people. We will not be defined by other people. And the book, Seeing Black, is a statement against all the erasure we have had throughout our history in this country. So, in my narrative, I addressed 2 situations that I was proud to be a part of. One was called The Ties That Bind and the Great Day Photo. The Great Day Photo was a photo of all Black artists of all genres. The other one was the Ties That Bind, representing writings and photos by 9 black photographers. Initially, it was supposed to be my images and my mentor images, which was Marion Porter, but I thought it would be a much broader spectrum of photos if we included other photographers. So those two things address us, being us, and it addressed the sense of erasure. Like I said earlier, there was one of the photographers we researched in 1870. It may have been black photography before 1870. May have been many after 1870. But we know how erasure happens in terms of black folks in this country. Right now, they're banning books, changing history, believe that you're not supposed to believe. It's just insane. So this book will make a statement in the face of all of that. Seeing black and seeing white. Deal with it. Yeah.
This is the great day photo that was done in Armstrong off of Congo Square. And this photo on this, because there was that 1998.
1998.
Yeah. We sent out a call and just ask for any of the black creators, or whoever you were doing more creative work. If you look at the picture, you probably, if you know folks, you'll see something. And that was the aesthetic. The aesthetic was to be inclusive rather than exclusive. And that's part of what this book is about.
In accordance with that image, Carol B. Bell and Chuck Solomon were the people behind the idea. They brought me in as the photographer to organize everything. And Carol had asked Alice Marcellus to go on WWOZ and try to reach out to all of the artists of all genres, how important this image in that day was. He said, this will be proof. You can't say that we are a rumor. And that just has resonated with me. And we had like 218 people showed up that day. We shot it at high noon. It was like a great homecoming. I mean, nobody was saying, women will take a picture. Everybody was patient. We were proud to be there and be a part of this unique and monumental photo. And I don't think you could do this photo anywhere else in the country because somebody will question why it's got to be all black or all white. Right? New Orleans is the only place that you can say, hey, all black, period. Don't say no more, leave. That's what was done. There had some white photographers out there who were told to leave. What about you, about us?
I have one more question on the front of my mind. So there is See the Blackwood book, obviously, but there's also See Blackwood Project, which encompasses exhibitions at various sites around town, curated majestically by Shannon Griffin. And I guess I'm wondering about the relationship between photos in a book and photos on a wall, especially Eric, you being a photographer and exhibiting your own work. Like, what is it like, I guess, to see it on the wall versus in a book, and like, how do they complement each other? I'm wondering.
Either one is gratifying, you know, to see your work on the wall, framed, and also to see your image in a book. Like Kalamu said, the book is forever. An image in the gallery is either going to be bought up. I got a whole bunch of them in my house. If anybody want a frame for it, let me know. So both of them are gratifying. And the reason that being in a book is so important because the book is forever. Period. An image may be seen by somebody else that is in a gallery or in a museum or something. That may be so, but the book is forever. And it's very gratifying and been a part of both of those instances.
I'll give an erudite comment. You know that we live in a society, so much of the society is here today, gone tomorrow. And at the same time, it's a society that values the written word. That's why you always hear these people talking about the Constitution. You know, like ain't nobody else had no Constitution.
Then it was a lie.
But what we were trying to do with Seeing Black was to make a statement that went beyond the here and now, and that would go beyond us. You know, and you're part of this, and Abram, because we had these ideas. We could have been done it someplace else. We could have been done it someplace else, but it was done here. And it was done by people here who recognize the importance of it.
And conceived by you.
You know, I mean,
No, conceived by you.
but listen, Black culture is full of people who create, like we on the way here, we were talking about the stoplight, right? As Granville Wood, y'all know him, right?
Yes, yes.
You understand what I'm saying? We have done so much. And a lot of it we don't even know. How many people here enjoy potato chips? They got potato chips. Black man did that. That's right, created the potato chip. We don't even think about these things. We've done so much.
Here you go again, changing the narrative. I keep telling this man, he asked me one time, he said, Eric, why nobody else thought about this? Because it was named Kalamu, Salaam. You know, we talk about Dr. Drew, it was plasma. Why somebody didn't do it before he did it? Why didn't do a stoplight before Granville did it? I mean, he doesn't want to take the compliment. But he thought of this, and we were along for the ride. I'm so glad I was part of it.
We are coming to the end of our time. Do we have any last questions or thoughts from the audience? I guess so. I don't think so.
No other questions? Any comments? Feel free to say something.
Yeah.
I can't wait to.
You can get it here.
Yeah. Are y'all willing to sign?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I just want to, again, I want to thank the University of New Orleans, Abram, Stein, and Chelsey, Shannon, and that whole crew, because we on, Eric and I, are one part of what made this book possible. Yeah, we're part of the creative aspects of it, and so forth and so on. But believe me, I've been around a while. I'm 70-something years old, and I've seen a lot of things. Had the opportunity to go literally around the world, and there are not many places where Black folk and white folk can work together and decide to do something that has a Black orientation. Huh?
well stated.
You know, I mean, this is not about.
I want to know what it's not about.
I do have a comment. I live in New York. I'm Columbus, middle child. This is youngest child. The baby. This is our mother. But I was in New York, and the 1619 Project has just done a photo book and the photo editor of the New York Times, because the New York Times is a partner, in the digital experience of the 1619 Project, who did the photo research. And she's a young Black woman. And she talked about the process of finding images that showed things that she didn't know existed, Black photographers from certain time periods that she didn't know existed. So knowing about your project and being at that event, I was just thinking about the value of showing the breadth of, what exists. And you only had two photographs per photographer. So this book doesn't just speak to what's in the book, but just the depth and the breadth of what's out there, what's been done, and what the history is. So I just saw an echo between those two projects, and it made me very happy.
Yeah, that's Jeannie Bora, middle child of 5, and she works up at Scholastic Magazine up in New York and all that stuff. She left here, and said, Jeannie, you going up there? I'm going through that. She said, yeah, I'm going through such and such. Somebody asked a question, what's next, or who's, so forth and so on. I'm not worried about it because I sleep at night knowing that, quote unquote, my children will carry on. And that is the heritage of New Orleans. That you go out to these second lines, this woman sitting here, Naomi gonna carry on. You understand what I'm saying? The young people of New Orleans are gonna carry on. I'm not even worried about it. And you can tell that by going out to the second lines and you might see somebody dancing and so forth and so on. But it's not just dancing. I mean, that's important. Believe me, dancing is important. I can't even step no more. But it's the fact that the transition is happening. And here in New Orleans, it's clear to us. It's really clear to us. You come down here from Cleveland, right? Yeah, from Cleveland. And I'm gonna leave with Naomi, who's your daughter. New Orleans, Naomi said, some of y'all seen Naomi around here. Naomi said, my mama from Cleveland, my daddy from Mississippi, but me, I'm from Boston.
Thank you so much, Clara and Eric. This was a really rich conversation. Thank you all for being here and for your questions and comments and presence. I see Megan is here to give us another Community Book Center giveaway. So thank you, and I hope you all have a good rest of your days.
Okay, so as you know, we are supporting 2 local independent booksellers this festival. The first is Tubby & Coo's Traveling Bookshop. They have been our festival bookseller since 2018, long before we moved here on Bayou Road. But when we moved here on Bayou Road, we had to recognize that we were moving next door to Community Book Center and support them during this festival as well. So for every session, we're giving away a $25 Community Book Center gift card. So you can go buy festival books here, and you can go next door and buy more different books. So the winner of the gift card for this session, my randomizer just disappeared, is Valerie Wheatley. Valerie? Okay, I'm gonna draw an alternate real quick. I love a randomizer, don't you? Catherine Cecil? Catherine? Oh, that's you, yay! Get your gift card, go shopping. I've got 2 more things. One is just a preview of what's coming up next in this room. There's a film screening of Time by Fox and Rob. If you are interested in the impact of the justice systems on families in Louisiana, stick around for that. We'll do a film screening followed by a Q&A with Fox and Rob. If you are interested in copyright law, out there in the lobby happening at the exact same time is a workshop on intellectual property rights for authors. Protect your IP, it is everything. 6 o'clock here, we have poets responding to the exhibit at the HNOC Captive State. They have gone to the exhibit, they have written poems in response. Kelly Harris DeBerry is on that bill. And then we're closing out at 8:30 in the lobby with an event also curated by Kelly Harris DeBerry, who has made this festival what it is this year. And that is a tribute to Frankie Beverly. So y'all hang out all day. That's the second thing I have to say. The third thing is we are experiencing in real time the miracle of the loaves and fishes. People keep eating and there still keeps being food. So y'all please eat some food because it's still there. I don't know how. 50 people have eaten food meant for 40 and it's still there. All right, and with that note, thank you again to Chelsey, Baba Kalamu, and Mr. Eric Waters.